While undergoing a major surgery, my husband hired an actor to sign our $400 million joint venture, but hello family, welcome back. Please do well to subscribe, and let's know where you are watching the story from in the comment section. The cold fluorescent lights above blurred as Clara was rushed down the hospital corridor on a stretcher. The beeping of machines, the hurried footsteps of nurses, and the urgent voices of doctors created a storm of noise around her. Her chest rose and fell shallowly, her body trembled. She felt the sting of needles, the weight of oxygen strapped to her face, and the terrifying knowledge that she was about to be cut open. "BP dropping! Get her into the theatre now!" a nurse shouted. Clara's eyes fluttered. She searched the crowd of rushing figures, desperate for one face, Daniel's. He had promised he would be here, holding her hand before they wheeled her in. He had promised to pray, to whisper strength into her ears. Her lips moved faintly, a whisper escaping. "Daniel, where are you?" The gurney doors slammed shut. The last thing she saw was a blur of white coats, and then the mask lowered over her nose. She closed her eyes and sank into darkness, clutching in her heart the belief that her husband was somewhere close, waiting for her. But Daniel was not waiting. Outside, while Clara's life hung between survival and death, Daniel sat in the back seat of a sleek black Mercedes parked just beyond the hospital gates. His suit was immaculate, his watch gleamed in the dim streetlight, but his eyes were cold and restless. His phone buzzed. He answered without hesitation. "She's ready?" a man's voice asked on the other end. "Yes," Daniel replied smoothly. "We move now. Bring her to me." Minutes later, the car door opened, and a woman slid inside. Her name was Rose. She wore a fitted, cream-colored suit identical to Clara's. Her dark hair was pinned up in a bun, her makeup carefully shaped to mimic Clara's features. The resemblance was unnerving. Daniel's gaze lingered on her face. "Almost perfect," he said, tilting her chin toward the light. "You've studied her mannerisms?" Rose nodded nervously. "Yes. I've practiced her voice, her walk, but Mr. Daniel, I still don't understand why I'm doing this. This isn't an audition. This is fraud. What if your wife—" "She won't know," Daniel cut her off sharply. His words sliced like glass. "Clara is under heavy anesthesia right now. By the time she wakes up, this will be history. You will go in as my wife, you will sign the papers, and then you will disappear. No one will ever question it. You understand?" Rose looked away, her fingers trembling in her lap. "I didn't think it would feel this wrong. She's your wife. She trusts you." Daniel leaned in close, his voice a low growl. "Rose, listen carefully. You're not here to feel, you're here to act. That's all. You wanted money. I'm offering you more than you could ever earn in 10 lifetimes on stage. Play your role. That's what you do, isn't it?" Rose's lips quivered. She wanted to run, but poverty had already chained her. She thought of her empty fridge, her overdue rent, her dreams crumbling faster than she could chase them. Slowly, she nodded. "I'll do it." Daniel smiled, satisfied. "Good girl. Tonight you become Clara, and Clara will never know what happened." At that same moment, inside the hospital, surgeons bent over Clara's open chest. Machines beeped frantically as her heart stuttered. The lead surgeon muttered, "She's crashing! Clamp now!" Clara's body convulsed on the table. Nurses rushed, sweat dripping down their brows. And somewhere deep in the darkness of anesthesia, Clara's mind screamed Daniel's name again. But he was nowhere near her. Instead, Daniel was guiding Rose into a glossy downtown office building where men in expensive suits waited around a polished wooden table. The joint venture contract lay ready. "Mrs. Clara, we are honored," one investor said warmly as Rose entered, mistaking her for the real wife. "Even with your health you came. That's dedication." Rose's throat tightened. She forced Clara's practiced smile, replying softly, "Of course. Business never sleeps." The papers slid toward her. Daniel's eyes burned into hers, commanding her to sign. Her hand shook as she lifted the pen. She saw Clara's face flash in her mind, weak, fragile, lying on a hospital bed. Rose's conscience screamed louder with every heartbeat. She hesitated. I don't know if I can... Daniel's hand pressed hard on her shoulder, his whisper like poison in her ear. Do it. Now. Her chest heaved, her pulse raced. And then, slowly, she scribbled Clara's name on the first line. Applause filled the room. On the second line, she signed again. Cameras flashed. On the third, she felt tears sting her eyes as the ink bled across the page. It was done. Daniel shook hands with the partners, his smile wide, his voice triumphant. To the world, he was the husband of a devoted wife. To himself, he was the mastermind who had just stolen a fortune from the woman who trusted him most. And to Rose, he was the devil who had just used her to bury another woman alive. Later that night, the surgery ended. Doctors sighed with relief. Clara had survived. The nurse leaned close to whisper in her ear as she stirred faintly. You're safe now. Your husband is here. But Clara's eyes remained closed, her lips dry and weak. She whispered only one word in her half-dreaming state. Trust. And outside her hospital door, Daniel stood tall, a bouquet of roses in hand, a mask of devotion plastered across his face. He smiled at the nurses, kissed Clara's forehead, and whispered gently in her ear, Everything is under control now, my love. But his smile told a different story. For while Clara fought for her life, Daniel had already signed away her future. And what Daniel didn't know was that desperation always leaves cracks in even the most perfect plan. Cracks that bleed, cracks that burn, and cracks that would one day bury him deeper than he could ever imagine. If you haven't subscribed yet, we'd love for you to join our community by hitting the subscribe button. Through our stories, we build hope and give a future to children and women who have been abused all over the world. Motivate us by subscribing and turning on your notification bell so you never miss a story that matters. Also, let us know in the comments. Where are you watching from and how did this story speak to you? Daniel, can we talk? Clara's voice was soft, almost pleading. He barely looked up from his phone. Talk about what? It was late evening, the house quiet except for the ticking of the old grandfather clock. Clara had been home for weeks since her surgery, healing, watching the man she once adored drift further away from her. He had grown colder, more distracted. He barely asked about her health anymore. About us, she said, gathering her courage. About the company. About everything. He sighed, setting his phone down with the impatience of a man forced into a chore. Clara, not this again. You need to focus on getting better, not dragging yourself into things you don't understand. Her chest tightened at the familiar sting of dismissal. She used to tell herself he spoke that way when he was stressed, that he didn't mean it. But lately it sounded too intentional, too sharp. She hesitated, then pressed on. I feel like I'm being shut out of decisions. I used to know every contract, every deal. Now I feel like I'm in the dark. Daniel's lips curved into something that wasn't quite a smile. Because you are. You're not in a position to handle the pressure right now. I'm not in a position? Her voice rose slightly, though still shaky. Daniel, I gave my life to this company. I worked nights while you slept. I missed birthdays, anniversaries. I fought for it every single day. Don't tell me I don't understand pressure. His eyes narrowed, irritation flashing across his face. Clara, don't start this. But she couldn't stop. The words tumbled out, desperate, aching. When I was in the hospital fighting for my life, do you know what kept me going? The thought of us. The thought that when I came back, we'd keep building what we started together. That all the sacrifices meant something. Her voice cracked, her eyes shining with unshed tears. Please, tell me it still does. Daniel looked at her for a long moment, then chuckled under his breath. You really don't get it, do you? Her heart thudded painfully. Get what? Love doesn't run companies, Clara. Hard choices do. Strategy does. While you were lying in that hospital bed, the world didn't stop. Deals had to be signed. Opportunities had to be seized. I couldn't just sit around waiting for you. Her stomach dropped. She whispered, "What deals, Daniel?" He waved a hand. "Business you don't need to worry about. Things I handled." That night, when he left for another meeting, Clara couldn't silence the unease clawing at her chest. She wandered into his study. The leather-bound books, the polished mahogany desk, it all looked the same, yet something felt off. That's when she noticed the drawer left slightly open. Daniel never left anything unfinished. He was obsessive about order. Her hand shook as she pulled it open. Inside were neatly stacked contracts. Her breath caught as she flipped through them. Her name, her signature, again and again. "No." Her voice broke. This isn't real." Her eyes blurred as she skimmed the words. Transfer of shares, joint venture, power of attorney. The dates slammed into her like blows. They matched the very days she was unconscious, fighting for her life. Her knees gave out, and she clutched the desk. Memories flooded back. Her countless sacrifices, the children they couldn't have to ensure the company could stand strong without distractions, the sleepless nights, the endless flights to secure investors while Daniel drank champagne in expensive hotel bars. Every time she had told herself, "It's worth it. We're building something together." But here was the truth. While she lay in pain, he was selling her piece of their empire, carving her name into papers she had never touched. When Daniel returned, he found her waiting. The contracts spread across his desk like evidence in a trial. "Clara?" His tone was casual, even bored. He dropped his keys onto the counter. "What's all this?" She held one of the contracts in her trembling hand. "Daniel," she whispered, "tell me you didn't do this." He glanced at the papers, then back at her. No panic, no guilt, just irritation. "Clara, those are business documents, things you don't need to stress over." Her voice trembled. Don't lie to me. These have my signature. But I didn't sign them. I couldn't have. I was in the hospital." Daniel chuckled, low and dismissive. "You're imagining things." "Imagining things?" Her voice broke into a scream. "Daniel, how could I have signed when I was unconscious? How?" His mask slipped then. His eyes turned cold, his jaw tight. "You're overreacting." "No, Daniel." She slammed the papers against his chest, her body shaking with fury. "For once, I am not overreacting. Tell me the truth." His lips twisted into a cruel smile. He leaned in close, his voice a venomous whisper. "Fine. You want the truth? Everything we built, I built it. Not you. You were just convenient." Her breath caught. "Convenient?" "Yes." His smirk deepened. "A pretty face. Investors love a polished image. You smiled, you played your part, and it worked. But let's not pretend, Clara. You were never more than that." Her whole body shook. The words cut deeper than any knife. She had spent years holding up the company, sweating over details, pulling them from near collapse to global recognition. And now, the man she had loved was reducing her to nothing but decoration. "You dare!" Her voice trembled with rage. "You dare say that to me? When I was the one drafting contracts while you partied? When I was the one pitching investors, fixing deals you nearly destroyed with your arrogance? When I worked through fevers and exhaustion because you couldn't be bothered to show up? I built this company, Daniel. I built it. And you stand here and call me a pretty face." Daniel's smile widened, sharp as glass. "And yet here we are. I hold the papers. I hold the power. All your hard work means nothing without control. And control, my darling, is mine." Tears streamed down Clara's cheeks, but they weren't tears of weakness. They were of betrayal, of rage, of something awakening inside her. "I loved you," she whispered, her voice breaking. "I trusted you with my life, and you sold me for power." For just a flicker of a second, his expression faltered. Then it hardened. He shrugged, turning away. "Love doesn't keep empires standing, Clara. Power does. Learn that." Her chest heaved, her fists clenched. She had never felt so hollow and yet so full of fire at once. The pain was becoming something else, something sharper. Daniel walked toward the door, not looking back. "Get some rest. You'll need your strength. This fight is already over." The door clicked shut. Clara stood in the silence, the contracts trembling in her hands. Slowly, her tears dried, her heart hardened, and then, through the stillness, she whispered, her voice low but steady, "No, Daniel. It's just beginning." Clara had always thought grief was loud, that it would scream in her chest, tear at her lungs and leave her begging for air. But she was wrong. Grief was quiet. It sat in the corners of her room like a shadow, followed her into her sleep and whispered in her ears when she woke. And betrayal? Betrayal was heavier than any scalpel the surgeons had cut her open with. She could still hear Daniel's words the night she confronted him. "You were just convenient. Just a pretty face. Convenient." Her hands curled into fists as she sat in her hospital bed, staring at the silent monitor by her side. Convenient? She had been the one who pounded on doors when investors refused to listen. She had been the one up at 3 a.m., building projections, writing proposals, guiding strategies. She had been the one people trusted. Without her, Daniel would still be selling empty dreams from a cheap office space. She was the architect. He was only the mask. And yet he had erased her, replaced her, signed her away with another woman's hands. That thought kept her awake for nights, until one afternoon, there was a knock at her door. The maid peeked in. "Mrs. Bennet? There's someone here to see you." Clara frowned. She wasn't expecting anyone. Her friends had stopped visiting after Daniel told them she needed rest, and she doubted her staff would dare disobey him. "Send them in," Clara said softly. The door creaked open, and a young woman stepped in. At first, Clara's breath caught. She recognized the sharp cheekbones, the delicate smile. Recognition was a blade. This was the woman Daniel had hired to replace her. Rose. But she didn't look like the woman in the photographs from the contract signing. Gone was the polished hair, the confident air. In its place was a girl who looked shattered, eyes swollen, mascara streaked down her cheeks, shoulders hunched as though shame itself had weight. Clara's first instinct was to tell her to leave, to scream, to throw something. But instead, she stayed still, her face an unreadable mask. "Why are you here?" Clara asked, her voice cold. Rose flinched at the sound. Her lips trembled. I needed to see you, please. Just give me a chance to explain." Clara's eyes narrowed. "Explain what? How you stood in my place. How you smiled with my lips and signed with my name. How you helped the man I trusted steal everything I built." Rose broke into tears immediately, clutching her bag to her chest as though it could shield her. "I swear to you, I didn't know it would end like this. I didn't know he would take everything from you. He told me it was just acting, just a role. I'm an actress, Mrs. Bennet. I was desperate. He said no one would get hurt." "No one would get hurt?" Clara repeated softly, her voice dripping with restrained fury. "Look at me, Rose. Do I look unharmed to you?" Rose's knees gave out, and she sank onto the floor. I know, and I hate myself for it. I thought it would be easy money. I thought it was harmless. But then I saw the way he celebrated after. I saw the news articles, the pictures, the way he erased you. And I couldn't sleep. I see your face when I close my eyes, even though we've never met until now. I hear your voice in my head, even though I don't know the sound. I feel your pain, Clara, and I can't live like this anymore." For the first time, Clara's composure cracked. Her throat tightened and she had to look away. There was something raw about Rose's confession. Not the words themselves, but the shaking, the way she was unraveling right there on the floor. "Get up," Clara said finally. Rose scrambled to her feet, wiping at her eyes. "I brought everything." She pulled a folder from her bag, her hands trembling so hard that the papers spilled onto the floor between them. Photos, contracts, bank transfers, even a small flash drive. Clara bent slowly, her fingers brushing over the evidence. One photograph stopped her cold. It was Daniel sitting with Rose, teaching her how to mimic Clara's signature. He was smiling, laughing, as though betrayal was a game. Clara's chest tightened with rage, but her voice stayed calm. Why would you risk coming here? Daniel would destroy you if he knew. Rose swallowed hard. Because I'm already destroyed. He threatened me when I wanted to walk away. He said if I ever spoke, he'd ruin my career, my name, my life. But I can't carry this anymore. I'd rather you have the truth than live another day in silence. Clara studied her for a long, heavy moment. Finally, she said, You realize what you've done can't be undone. You've made yourself my enemy by helping him. Rose nodded quickly, tears streaking her face. I know, but I don't want to be your enemy anymore. Let me help you, please. I'll do whatever you ask. For the first time, Clara leaned forward, her voice dropping to a whisper. Then listen to me, Rose. I don't want the police. I don't want the courts. That would be too easy, too merciful. Daniel deserves worse than justice. He deserves to choke on his own victory. Rose blinked, startled by the quiet steel in her tone. What? What are you going to do? Clara's lips curved into the faintest smile. I'm going to let him believe he's already won. I'll let him celebrate, boast, and drown himself in the illusion of power. And then, when he least expects it, I'll strip it all away, piece by piece, until he has nothing left. Rose's breath caught. She had expected tears, rage, maybe even forgiveness. But not this, not the calm promise of a storm. You scare me, Rose whispered. Clara's gaze locked onto hers, unwavering. Good, because the woman Daniel betrayed died on that operating table. What came back is something he'll never be ready for. Silence filled the room. Only the faint ticking of the clock could be heard, each second a drumbeat of war. At last, Rose nodded. Tell me what to do. Clara gathered the papers into her lap, her fingers steady now, her eyes burning with new fire. For now, you disappear. He mustn't know you've betrayed him. When I need you, I'll call. Until then, not a word, not a whisper. Do you understand? Yes, Rose breathed. Clara looked back down at the flash drive in her palm, her grip tightening. For the first time since her surgery, she felt alive. Not because of the machines that had saved her, but because of the storm rising quietly inside her. Daniel laughed downstairs with his friends that night, drinking to his victory. And Clara smiled in the dark, her storm already gathering, silent but certain. Clara wiped her tears before Daniel entered the room. She let her shoulders slump, her eyes dull, her movements fragile. An image of a woman who had given up. She knew him well enough to understand what he wanted to see. Her surrender. When he walked in, Daniel smirked, his hands tucked into his pockets like a king surveying conquered land. You look better, he said, his tone laced with mock concern. Recovery suits you. I was worried for a while. Clara forced her lips into a weak smile, lowering her gaze as though she couldn't hold his eyes. Thank you, she whispered, her voice trembling just enough to sound defeated. Daniel's chest puffed with satisfaction. He pulled out a chair and sat opposite her, crossing one leg over the other. You know, Clara, life has a way of teaching us lessons. You should understand by now that fighting me is useless. We could have had it all. No, I have it all, and you. He paused, letting his eyes drift over her like she was nothing. You're just lucky I'm merciful enough to still let you stay in this house. Clara swallowed hard, feigning shame. She clutched her blanket like a child seeking comfort, and said nothing. Silence stretched, and Daniel leaned forward, his smirk widening. Good. That's the Clara I know. Quiet, obedient, soft. Maybe now you'll accept reality. Inside, Clara's heart burned with rage, but her face remained calm. She lowered her head further, biting the inside of her cheek until she tasted blood, just to stop herself from exploding too soon. When Daniel left the room, Humming in triumph, Clara exhaled shakily. Her body trembled, not from fear, but from the sheer effort of playing the victim. Every smile she faked was a dagger to her pride, but she endured, because she knew the sweetest revenge required patience. In the following days, she perfected her act. She stayed quiet during meals, nodded when spoken to, and even allowed Daniel to parade himself like a savior. The more broken she appeared, the more careless he became. At night, she scribbled notes, piecing together timelines, tracing every deal he had made, every lie he had told. Rose's evidence was neatly tucked away in a safe place, untouched but ready. Her maid, Maria, noticed the change. One evening, as she served Clara tea, she whispered cautiously, "Madam, forgive me, but why do you act like you've given up? I've seen you stronger than this." Clara looked at her with tired eyes, then let out a shaky laugh. "Because sometimes," she said softly, "the best way to win is to let your enemy think you've already lost." Weeks passed, and Daniel grew reckless in his arrogance. He hosted lavish dinners, inviting friends and business partners. He made jokes at Clara's expense, calling her the fragile flower who wilted under pressure. Guests laughed, and Daniel basked in their admiration. Clara sat at the table, her hands folded neatly on her lap, her face calm. She let them laugh. Every insult was a nail in his coffin. Every mockery was fuel for the storm she was building in silence. But she never flinched. She never showed her hand. When guests left and the house quieted, Clara stood by the window, gazing at the moon. Her reflection stared back at her in the glass, eyes no longer soft but sharp, calculating. "He thinks I'm broken," she whispered to herself. "Good. Let him think so. The higher he climbs, the harder the fall." And with that, Clara closed the curtains, her mind already weaving the final strands of the trap. The ballroom glowed under chandeliers, all crystal and gold, as a string quartet whispered through the air and cameras clicked like insects around flowers. Daniel stood at the podium in a tuxedo that fit like a boast. "Thank you for believing," he said, smiling into the lights. "Tonight we honor vision, grit, and leadership, the force that carried us to 400 million in value." He laid a hand on his chest. "My leadership." A quiet ripple of laughter moved through the front tables. Board members nodded. Investors raised their glasses. Daniel breathed it in like perfume. "And now," he continued, "we turn the page. The future is mine to write." The double doors opened with a hush that cut the room in half. Heads turned. A camera flash popped. Clara stepped in, calm as midnight water, her gown moving like smoke around her legs. She did not hurry. She did not smile. She simply walked, her heels ticking a slow metronome toward the stage. Daniel's mouth softened, then hardened. "Clara," he said into the mic, voice sweetened with varnish. "Look who's back. Everyone, my wife." Clara reached the foot of the stage and looked up at him as if she had all the time in the world. "Your wife," she repeated, not climbing. "That sounds almost honest." "Let's not do this," Daniel muttered, hand over the mic, smile still pinned on. "Take a seat. We'll talk later." "We'll talk now," she said, and held out her hand for the microphone. Polite laughter stirred, some uncomfortable, some eager. Daniel hesitated, then handed it to her, a little too fast. Clara turned to the room. "Good evening. I won't keep you long." Her voice was steady, cool as glass. "You've been told a story about who built this company. Tonight you will hear another." She tilted her chin toward the LED screens behind the stage. A technician in the back, hers, tapped a tablet. The screen flickered. Then Daniel's voice filled the room, proud and ugly. "She's just a pretty face. I built this." She signs and smiles. The quartet stopped mid-phrase. No one moved. On the screen, a second clip rolled. Daniel's reflection in a dark car window. An envelope passing from his hand to a woman's. Rose. His whisper clear. "Do what I said. Sign we finish her tonight." "Lies!" Daniel barked, blood rising to his cheeks. "This is edited. Slander. Turn it off." Clara faced him without blinking. There's more. A third clip, his low laughter in a restaurant, clink of glass, his words almost lazy. If she doesn't make it, I clean it all up. Either way, it's mine. Gasps crackled across the tables. A woman at the board table covered her mouth. Phones appeared like a field of stars. Mr. Lawson, an early investor with careful hands and old money eyes, stood. Daniel, is that your voice? It's doctored, Daniel said, too quickly. Please, everyone. Clara raised the mic. There are emails as well, transfers, a wire trail, a false power of attorney dated while I was under anesthesia. All of you have copies in your inboxes. Time-stamped. Verified Ms. Green, the board chair, pushed back her chair. Our counsel is here, she said, turning to a woman in a navy suit. Is there a temporary order? The attorney lifted a folder. This afternoon we received an emergency injunction. Mrs. Cole's voting rights are restored pending investigation. Any transfer of her shares is suspended. The joint venture executed with her impersonation is voidable. Outrageous, Daniel said, gripping the podium. Green, sit down. Ms. Green did not sit. Daniel, we will have an emergency session now. Reporters edged closer. Mrs. Cole, someone called from the press row. Did you orchestrate this reveal tonight? Clara looked toward the cameras. I orchestrated nothing. I simply turned on the lights. She turned back to the crowd. Many of you know me. You've seen me on factory floors at 2 a.m., in terminals catching red-eye flights, in conference rooms with metrics on the wall and coffee gone cold. I built forecasts. I wrote the decks. I closed the deals he forgot to follow. I did the work Daniel called menial when he wanted applause. He called me a pretty face. I call what I did labor. Daniel shoved past the podium, reaching for the mic. Enough, he snapped. You've embarrassed yourself. Security! 2 hotel security guards stepped to the edge of the stage, eyes on Ms. Green, not on him. She lifted a finger. Wait. Mr. Lawson's voice cut through. I'm rescinding my commitment, he said to the room, phone in his hand. Effective immediately. Another investor, young, loud, very online, stood up. Same here. Our fund can't back fraud. Fraud? Daniel laughed, strained and wild. Because my wife plays a video at a party and you collapse? Be serious. Clara met his eyes. You told me I was convenient, she said softly enough that only the front tables heard, the mics catching every syllable. Do you still believe that? He glared at her, and for a moment the room saw the face beneath the polish. A woman in a black dress stepped from the wings, rose, head down, hands clasped. She stopped at the stairs, shaky but steady. I'm here, she said, voice small but carrying. He paid me. I signed as her. I recorded him because I was scared. I'm sorry. She looked at Clara, then at the room. I'm willing to testify. Daniel pointed, sputtering. She's a failed actress. She'll say anything. Ms. Green turned to counsel. We will adjourn to the conference room, she said. Now. The board rose as one, a quiet storm in suits and silk. Investors drifted after them, murmuring to assistants, calendars open, understandings unraveling. The quartet began to play again, too softly, then stopped. Outside the ballroom doors, the press gathered in a tight knot. Flashbulbs fired when Clara stepped out. Mrs. Cole, will you take over the company? Are you pressing charges? Is your marriage over? What happens to the employees? Clara stood on the top step, the city glittering beyond the glass. I've asked for a forensic audit, she said. I'm cooperating fully with investigators. I'm seeking to restore stability for our employees and partners. This company will not be punished for one man's choices. Will you divorce him? A reporter shouted. She paused, eyes steady. I filed this morning. A commotion rose behind them. Daniel pushed through with 2 publicists in tow. You don't print a word, he barked. She's lying. She's vengeful. She's sick. Clara turned slightly, not enough to face him, enough to acknowledge. Stop, she said, almost gently. It's over. It's not over until I say it is, he hissed.